Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast. We are, of course, brought to you by One Pie Pizza, onepiepizza.com, 2185 Clinton Street in Seneca, in Hiller and Comerford, hillercomerford.com, 1866 Hiller Law for your local personal injury disability go-to. It has been longer than I would have liked, that's for sure. A week-long battle with an illness that was not fun. But we grinded through, we pushed our way through, and here we are, one more game before the Olympic break, and a team that continues to just truck along, make their way towards the playoffs comfortably at this point, and pick up games, pick up wins against good teams in difficult situations in a compact schedule, and there's really not a lot to be disappointed about it. And I think that's going to drive a lot of the conversation that I'm going to get into as I go here through my topics. Is as we get through the Olympic break, shift into March, shift into the last quarter of the season. My focus is slowly shifting to what do they need, not to be a playoff team, because I think as currently constructed, they're good enough to be a playoff team, as we've seen. What I am now starting to focus on more is what do they need to do to win in the postseason, to win around, to beat Montreal, Carolina, Detroit, Boston, whatever, Tampa Bay, whatever your matchup is ended up being. What does this team need to get there? What do they need to improve upon to be able to win in the playoffs? So, of course, we're going to get into the game stuff as we move along here over the next 2 months of the season. But that's, I think, is going to be the primary focus that I have, definitely leading into the deadline. And then beyond that, as we head down the final stretch into the season. But bringing it back to this particular evening, what we're going to discuss, I'm going to start here in a moment going through the road trip in Florida. We're going to get in a little bit about, like I just talked about, something it's right now is the number one question on my list of what do they need to be a team that can win in the playoffs. And then we're going to get into the roster freeze that kind of spins off that conversation, some players that could help them. Because when they get back, I believe the NHL trade deadline is 2 weeks from when games start up again. So it's right back in the thick of things when we get back from the Olympic break. But okay, let's talk about the Florida trip. 2 games in Miami or Sunrise against the Panthers, and then in Tampa Bay against the Lightning. 2 different games for sure. Well, obviously, we'll start with Florida. That's another significant win, and it's the second time it feels like in 2 weeks or a week and a half that I wouldn't say officially, but they've put a pretty big damper on an Atlantic Division team in terms of playoff possibilities. So a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago, they did it to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then I think they did a similar thing with the Florida Panthers. They were 10 points clear of them going into play tonight. I'm pretty sure the Panthers ended up beating the Bruins, if I'm not mistaken, as we're recording this here. Let's see. Oh, no. Boston came back and tied at 4-4 in overtime. Of course. Everybody's got to get a point in the Atlantic. So it was 4-2 about 10 minutes ago. So that flipped, of course, because why not? But anyways, the Sabres were 10 points clear of them going tonight. They're now 9 points clear, I guess, with the loser point or the overtime point. We'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I mean, it pretty much buries them in the standings. They're going to need to go on some crazy run. They have a ton of injuries themselves. It just seems like a step back here for the Panthers where they were able to work their way through the injuries last season and just not able to survive it and do it this year. And, that happens. It catches you, and good for the Sabres, for taking advantage of that and moving their way up the standings when the opening presented itself. But I thought overall a gritty effort there in Florida. A veteran team that really had a lot to play for in terms of they knew how important that game was. Sam Bennett goes down early in that game, so that obviously works to the Sabres' advantage, and they're already out Barkov, already out Marchand again, and a couple other guys too. Anton Lundell was another one that didn't play in that game. So, you took advantage of it, but still it was a team that was pushing, understood the importance of trying to get those 2 points. They went down 2-0 early. They looked really rough in the beginning of that game, but to Lindy Ruff's credit, to the team's credit, they found their footing. They got that game back 2-2 for the end of the first period, and then they were on their way to win that game in regulation and pick up a big 2 points. And then moving to the next night in Tampa Bay, a much different game in terms of really you went into that one, with the Sabres having their own injuries. No Norris, Kesselring got a night off, it seemed. Benson got injured in Florida. It doesn't seem like it's that serious from what the coach says, so that's good. But I don't know if he'll play tomorrow against Pittsburgh. I guess we'll see. But no Benson in that game. So you're down some big important pieces on back-to-backs, having a pretty heavy beginning of the season AHL lineup that you're playing against arguably the best team in the league in Tampa Bay. And of course, Tampa Bay, no Point, no Sorelli, no Nick Paul. They were missing some guys on their end too, to be fair. But back-to-back nights on the road, hung in there and battled. If you would have told me going into that Panthers game they were getting 3 out of 4 points in that trip, I would have taken it, no questions. Of course, it's a little bit rough when you consider they had 2 leads in the third period against the Lightning, and you can't close it on a regulation. That's tough. Tip of the cap to Radish, 25 seconds left tying it. He's on an absolute heater and just wired a shot. I don't know. Like I said, you tip the cap there. That's sometimes the shooters get you, and he got Ellis on that play, and then overtime, kind of went the way that it went, and is what it is. But you walk out of that trip 3 out of 4. You put yourself in great position now, regardless of how things go against Pittsburgh on Thursday. They're going to have a nice cushion going into this break, but if they get a couple things on the scoreboard tonight to go their way and they win tomorrow, there is a possibility that they will be in the second spot in the Atlantic Division going into the Olympic break. Detroit would have to lose tonight. I think Montreal did win, but the Sabres have more regulation wins that would jump them over them on tiebreaker, and Detroit would fall out on points percentage, and I think tiebreaker too. So that Detroit would be the wild card 1 team. The Sabres would be Atlantic 2, Montreal Atlantic 3. If all those things hold, including the Sabres picking up a victory against the Penguins. So, gritty performances, great effort when it needed to be there. Shout out to Peyton Krebs against Florida. Could argue to say maybe his best game as a Sabre against the Panthers. A really good game. Got bumped up the lineup. So full credit to him there. Matthias, aka Michael Samuelson, had some nice goals against the Lightning. You kind of hope that Doan had the game winner at the end of the power play, and I thought their power play looked pretty good for the most part against the Lightning, who was a good penalty killing team. So, maybe that continues to trend up here as we head to the break and then coming out of it. Gives the coaches some time to maybe build upon that during the break. That's something to think about too. This is a part of the calendar in an NHL season that you don't get very often. You get a 3-ish week break here, 2.5 week break to self-evaluate your team, make changes, analyze what is and isn't working and how to improve upon that or continue to build on it. So I'm curious how this coaching staff and front office takes to that and takes advantage of that over the next couple weeks here that will be without Sabres hockey, unfortunately, when the buzz is maybe at its highest. To not have it will be a bummer, but we'll have Olympic hockey at least to fill the gap for us for a couple of weeks. Okay, so those are the games. Pleased, happy, bummer the way it turned out at the end of the day in Tampa Bay, but I'll take 3 out of 4 on that trip all day long. So the next thing I want to get into here and it's what I talked about in the beginning, is the number one question I have for this team from a roster build perspective, from a Jarmo Kekalainen front office perspective in terms of doing something before the trade deadline. I don't think we're going to get anything big or major by any means. I don't think we're going to see a significant roster change and a lot of pieces coming off this roster. It just doesn't make sense to do that with the heater that they've been on. So I don't anticipate that. I think if we're going to get something here, it's going to be, a depth move to build your bottom six, maybe your middle six, or a depth defenseman, or both. We'll see where Jarmo goes, but I'm not anticipating anything of huge significance that will require one or two pieces to come off of this current roster. I just don't think that's a wise decision. And I don't think that's something they're looking for right now, to be honest. But we'll get into that part in a second. The question I have is this. It is round 1 of the playoffs. Who is the matchup line on this team? What I mean by that is, in a playoff series, it is a 7-game series, smaller sample size. It is very matchup driven. Power play against penalty kill against power play, vice versa. Top line against a shutdown line, your middle six, your goaltending matchup. All of those things come more into focus. And one of the big things you want to have, especially if you want to make a long run in the playoffs, is you want to have a matchup line. So what is my matchup line that in a 7-game series is going to 60-70% of a game be on the ice with Dylan Larkin, Cole Caulfield, Sebastian Aho, Nikita Kucherov? Who is it? The problem is I don't think they have one. I don't think that they currently have the pieces on the roster to assemble one. If you look at the way the lines are constructed right now, even if you throw Josh Norris back in, Josh Norris is not going to be on a line that's going to be a shutdown. Is not going to be your shutdown line. Tage Thompson is not going to be on a line that's going to be your shutdown line. Your fourth line cannot be a shutdown line. We're going to get to them in a minute. Their numbers are not very good. So then it brings you to Ryan McLeod, who, in theory, could be your shutdown center. But currently, he plays with Jason Zucker and Jack Quinn. 2 wingers who I think to varying degrees can struggle with the aspects of the speed in terms of Zucker and the playing style in terms of Quinn of a playoff series. Now, I think Zucker has the veteran experience to understand what is required of him. He, I think, has the power play upside that Quinn doesn't have. So, you figure it out with Zucker and you'll be on your way. But a Zucker-McLeod-Quinn line can't be my matchup line, especially if you look at their numbers at 5-on-5 this season. So they're a 50% expected goal share line. I think they played 135 minutes together now. On this team, among lines to play at least 60 minutes together, they have the highest expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. And they have the second highest expected goals for per 60 at 5-on-5 and a 62% goal differential. So some of those numbers are good. 62% goal differential, fine. That's probably the reason why they're staying together currently, is because of how often they're scoring. They do generate quality opportunities when they get them, but it's that defense part of it. It is essentially a high event line. You can't have your matchup line be a high event line. Your matchup line needs to basically go smother the other team's top line, win those minutes ideally, but worst case scenario, just you don't you play low event hockey. You don't let the other team get a lot of quality looks to the top line, and you hold them in the offensive zone in theory and eat up those time on the ice, and all of that. That is your game plan for a matchup line. So I don't know currently in how you would piece together this roster if you can construct that. And I think that's a problem, a significant problem. Even if you want to, on top of a matchup line, you don't have a good centerman on this team that wins a lot of draws. They're really not good at it. It was pretty glaring against Tampa Bay when the Lightning had Jake Gensel and basically no centers, and Tampa Bay still won the faceoff battle. Not to mention Tampa Bay in themselves is a pretty poor faceoff team, but no Point, no Nick Paul, two guys who are decent, or even Cirelli, a couple of guys who are decent at that. So, I guess that brings us to that should be the number one thing that Jarmo Kekalainen is out there looking for. Like I said, you can't rely upon a Peyton Krebs, Beck Melenstein, Justin Danforth, Josh Dunn, whatever combo you want to put there to be your shutdown line. The fourth line has been, from a numbers aspect, really bad in terms of expected goal share, no matter what line you put together there. So it's they're not allowing a ton of goals at least, but it seems like a lot that whenever that fourth line's on the ice in the last 2 weeks, maybe they're in the defensive zone a lot, and that's another issue that you probably got to figure out here. But yeah, I mean the matchup line thing is number one for me. And then I guess that then brings us to the conversation of, well, coming out of the Olympic break, as we're now on the roster freeze through the 22nd of February, so we can't have any trades now at this point. But what is out there really is the question to get that need. And I know Rob Thomas is a lot of people's favorite idea because he's a good player. He's a great player. He would be, an impact player in this team. I just don't think that's something they're looking at right now for, a couple of reasons. One, I think what the Blues are asking, the price is going to cost multiple pieces off of this current roster, and they're just not going to do that right now. Maybe in the offseason, it would be a different conversation, but I just don't think they're going to be able to do that. The only way where that can get interesting is if Josh Norris is part of the deal, but again, I don't think the Blues, are going to trade for a guy that plays 33 games a season or whatever. So, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work in season. If Thomas was to stay into the offseason, to move him then, maybe it makes more sense, but I just don't think that's realistic. I think, the dream. Let's just throw everything to the side. The past history, the fact that the Nashville Predators are giving this player, if they do move him, say in where he'll go. I think the dream for what I kind of just laid out and what they need in terms of a face-off guy, a shutdown centerman, and somebody who not only can be a shutdown centerman, but also can flip the game on that opponent's top line, is Ryan O'Reilly. Now, one, is Nashville going to move him? That remains to be seen. The price is probably going to be high. I'm not really afraid to pay that. It's a very cheap cap hit for him. He has one more season left. I believe it's $4.5 million, if I'm not mistaken. But But like I said, he doesn't have any trade protection, which is nice in theory, but Nashville has said they're going to treat him as if he does, and he'll be involved in that conversation no matter where he goes. So I thought maybe we'll get lucky if Barry Trotz wasn't going to stay on as general manager, but it seems like he is until they find a replacement. So with Trotz in charge, though, they're going to treat him basically as a trade protection guy. So then you get to the whole conversation of, well, what do you want to back? Does Terry Pegula want him back in the organization? And, you have to clear those hurdles, and then you get into the figuring out a trade that make both sides happy too. So it feels like there's a lot of hurdles that you'd have to clear there. So probably not realistic at the end of the day, but man, look, if there was a way, and I'm going to get crazy here for a minute, if there was a way that they could find to get O'Reilly on this team, maybe the goaltending would prevent you in a playoff series against, other top goaltenders you would match up against, but I could see them definitely winning a round. I can see them definitely winning 2 rounds with him on the team. I think it fills such a huge need. You can then drop McLeod down to being your quote-unquote fourth-line center, or you can put him on the wing too, a Ryan O'Reilly, a Ryan McLeod combo as a shutdown, I think could work as well. Yeah, maybe getting ahead of myself, of course. As I said, it's probably unrealistic, but that's the dream for me. That's the dream fit that fits so many needs. This team wouldn't be on their way. They'd be on their way this year, but I'll probably have to swallow that one deep. And when he goes to wherever he goes, or he stays in Nashville and he's moved in the off season, whatever. That'd be fun. That'd be cool, just for the story alone too, of him coming back with the past history and all that. It'd be fun. It'd be a fun thing. All right, let's move past that though. So who are some other guys that we can, not even just centers, that we can put in a shutdown quote unquote role or middle six situation that is responsible both defensively and also can bring you a little bit of upside offensively? So there's guys I've talked about before in articles I've written. Nino Niederreiter from the Winnipeg Jets comes to mind. I think playoff style guy, has 1 more year on his contract. Vlad Nemestikov, I know, is somebody that they've liked in the past. I don't know if it's somebody they're interested in again under Jarmo Kekalainen. There was some familiarity in that front office with Nemestikov, so maybe. But he doesn't have the offensive upside that Nino Niederreiter would give you by kind of a wide margin, but still a respectable bottom 6 forward. Jason Dickinson from the Chicago Blackhawks is somebody I think is really interesting. He gives the versatility of being able to play center and wing. His defensive numbers are pretty good. There is some offensive upside there. Again, nothing crazy by any means, but there is offensive potential there. I think you can get him in a matchup role. If you put him in the middle 6, bottom 6 of your lineup, he could work. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. His contract is not that much with the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm pretty sure there's no trade protection there as well. I'm double checking here. Dickinson. No trade protection, $4.25 million. Like I said, a pending unrestricted free agent, 30 years old. Now, he is a leader on that team. He's been there a long time, so then you consider that. Not one of those situations where maybe they let him be involved in where he would go. We'll see. I'm trying to kind of thought about it. I wonder if he has connections to Lindy Ruff at all from Dallas. I think Ruff might have been gone before Dickinson got there. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, he didn't play very much his first few years in Dallas, so I don't know if that would have aligned. Actually, I think he did. I think he had a little bit of a time with Lindy Ruff in Dallas. This is the benefit of looking things up on the fly instead of having this information prepared. But, when things pop in your head, you're not thinking about it in the moment until, of course, you're on here talking and you have to sit here and talk your way through and delay time. while you look this information up. But yeah, so Lindy Ruff was the Dallas Stars until 16-17. Okay, so I don't think you did that. So scratch that. I guess there's no real true connection there between Dickinson and Lindy Ruff. So I guess there's 11 games worth if you want it. 15-16 you played 1, 16-17 you played 10 for the Stars. So a little bit of crossover maybe, but nothing much. But it's a connection, so I guess we could, we can hang our hat on that one. Who else have I got on here? 2 Vancouver Canucks players. Both I've heard that there is some interest in from the Sabres. Teddy Bluger is one. He is a bottom 6 player, centerman. Again, not a bad matchup guy. I think he did really well for the Vancouver Canucks a couple years ago in the playoffs. You could utilize him in that role as well. And the other one is Connor Garland. So Garland is an interesting one because he fits from a playing style and maybe what they would be looking for, as a responsible defensive player that can also give you some offensive upside. No trade protection there for Garland. I like the player a lot. I'm a big fan of him. I think in any other scenario, I'd be open to making the move to acquire him. Here's the problem that I have. He's 29 years old, and he has already agreed to a new contract with Vancouver that will pay him $6 million for the next 4 years. Now, is $6 million a lot of money? No. With the cap going up, I think it's manageable. But again, he'll be 30 years old in March, so that'll carry him until he's 34, 35. And you have trade protection there too, by the way, within that contract. So he has a no move clause for the first 3 years, and then he has a 15-team no trade list in year 4. It just seems like a lot to commit to future salary when you're sitting here and thinking about Noah Ostlund, Konsta Helenius, Yuri Kulik when he comes back. Doan just signed a new extension. What are you going to do with Alex Tuck? It just doesn't seem like it really is going to work, with that extension. If he was a pending unrestricted free agent, I'd be all over it in a rental situation, and I think many other teams would be as well. But yeah, the contract situation there, I think, unfortunately, makes me pretty hesitant about making that move as much as I like the player. But it would be a fit for what they'd be looking for, at least in terms of a winger, not to mention a right shot to forward, who this team doesn't have very many of, and they could use that. No, I don't think of anybody else. I was thinking there for a second if I had another player to bring up, but I don't. I mean, I'm sure there's other options, right? You can go through the Blues. You can surmise some options there, maybe some more on the Blackhawks roster. Vinny Trocheck from the Rangers is somebody that you could consider. There's some money there that you have to think about as well. I do think that there is trade protection. I'm double checking that on Puckpedia. Trocheck, yeah, he has a 12-team no trade list, but that's $5.625 million for the next for 3 more years at 32 years old. I mean, while it's a fit from a centerman, from a player who can match up, playoff experience, all of that all checks. Again, it's the future commitments. The same conversation we just had about Garland, and Trocheck is 2 years older. So yeah, I mean, he's somebody you could consider. I think the price might be a little bit crazy on him, especially when you consider that the Rangers didn't get a lot for Artemi Panarin, or at least as much as you were expecting in that trade with the Los Angeles Kings. I think they're going to hold a pretty hefty price on Vinny Trocheck. So considering the contract, it's probably not something I really want to be all that crazily involved in. I'd rather pursue some other options, but if that was what they did, I wouldn't be opposed to it either by any means. Beyond the forwards, though, I think defense is something that we should keep an eye on, and definitely some depth. Where they want to go will I think maybe dictate Connor Timmins' status and how he looks when he gets back. So he broke his leg, I think, in early December. If you do the math on 6 to 8 weeks from that, he should be back. Likely, if not right after the break, right away, shortly into the return from the break. So that's another defenseman you're going to get into the mix here. Maybe they just consider him their depth add and go about their ways, because then you'll have Bryson and Metza behind him, and you have Zach Jones in the AHL. But I would understand if they want to go out and do something more, like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. If Toronto makes him available, somebody I'd be really interested in. That's another player with some term. So if you're bringing him in, you're going to have him for a couple of years. He's got 2 more years at $3.5 million on his contract. 16-team no trade list, but maybe the sweetest connection with Rasmus Dahlin would make him consider coming to Buffalo, and then it's not far from where he currently is in Toronto, so that's maybe an easy move from a family perspective. But yeah, he'd be somebody that I'd be pretty interested in. From if I'm looking a level above just a 7, 6, 7, 8 defenseman, if I want a real guy who can give me some solid play next to Michael Kesselring, I think Ekman-Larsson are probably near the top of my list. And it's the same thing. You can look at those same exact teams at the bottom right now, and I think that the hard part, with where you're going into this Olympic break and then the trade deadline being right out of it. Now teams, have a couple of weeks here to look themselves in the mirror, have conversations internally, and decide, well, do I think I can make a push? Do I want to be a seller? So I think coming out of the break, there can't be moves. I think there will probably be a lot of conversation. Those things can go on while trades themselves cannot be finalized. So it's like, on one hand, I could see there being more movement, or a lot, I guess, what I'm getting to, or a good amount. But as where I was going to is there's still a lot of teams that are, consider themselves in the playoff mix in both conferences, that you might not have a lot of teams that are sitting here looking to be sellers. The Eastern Conference remains just insanely jam-packed. The Blue Jackets, who looked like that they were dead in the water a couple of weeks ago, have now won 7 in a row. They climbed to within 4 points of the Bruins, or 2 points back of the Islanders in the Metro. And then they are 5 points back of the Sabres, who sit in the first wild card spot. So they're at 65 points. The Leafs are at 63, but I think they're kind of, too far back to really make an impact. And Washington maybe has a better shot at the Metro than catching the wild card. And then you're in your mix of 61-point teams of Florida, Ottawa, Philadelphia at 60, and then the Devils and Rangers at the bottom, who are kind of working their way out of the picture here. Which is crazy. The Devils are buyers and bought Bukestad. They're 11 points out, even 9 points out of the Metro at third place. That's kind of nutty to me, but okay, sure, to each their own, I guess. Going through that, if I'm going to think of a team that's really, and they're not even that scary, but if there's a team I think that can make a run in there, I think Ottawa, if they can get some goaltending, some saves, are not a bad roster overall. But I do think, 8 points right now behind Boston, 9 points behind Buffalo. That is a heavy hill to climb. And you got to jump 1, 2, 3, 4 teams too on top of that. That's heavy. If I was sitting here in Buffalo spot, 9 points out, like I'm talking sell. just not our year, not going to happen. But you never know. You never know. Ottawa might try to make a run there. They're a team I think legitimately can. The rest of them I think are kind of Columbus. We'll see. They're getting that new coach bump. Maybe they can force their way into the Metro. I don't think the Islanders are that good. I think Pittsburgh's starting to, even though they were 7-1-2, they may kind of fall back to earth a little bit there. But the Sabres' next opponent. But yeah, I think from the standings aspect, like I said, there's not a lot of room there. There's still teams that maybe will convince themselves they can get in that mix. The Western Conference is pretty close. There's 1, 2, 3 teams that are within 3 points of the second wild card spot in the Western Conference. Chicago has themselves 8 points out. So you start to see kind of the fall off at the Blackhawks, and then the Winnipeg Jets, Calgary Flames, Blues, and Vancouver Canucks well out of the picture in the Western Conference. But there's a few teams, including the Kings, who just made a big trade to get Panarin, that find themselves in the mix. The Central Division has really ran away with it, with Colorado 81 points, Minnesota 76, Dallas 75. That's pretty heavily set your top 3 in that division. The Pacific is a little bit closer with Vegas, Edmonton at 64, Anaheim 63. And then you get into Seattle, Utah, Los Angeles, San Jose, all teams that are going to be in the mix there for the top 3 in that division. So like I was saying, a lot of teams in the mix still. It makes it difficult to find your true buyers. True sellers, I should say. But at the same time, I think maybe this break kind of helps some teams really have good conversations about where they want to be, what they want to do, what the market looks like. So, I said it a few times. I think this Olympic break is going to be helpful for a couple of reasons. Teams will get the opportunity to self-scout. Teams will get the opportunity to have discussions about what they want to be in the trade market. And then you're going to get healthy. And I think that's kind of the spot maybe to end it on today. If you look at it as a real possibility coming out of this break, we'll see if Josh Norris plays tomorrow against the Penguins. But if he doesn't, you're going to get Norris, probably Benson if it's not serious, probably Timmins. It sounds like Danforth from what Lindy Ruff has said, probably Josh Dunn. And then maybe Luukkonen, that one's maybe it's a little bit up in the air. But 2.5 weeks off, get some rest, get healed up there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players you're going to get back into the mix that you've been out with in 3 of them at least. 4 if you include Norris, only played a handful of games this season. You've been without for heavy portions of the season. You're going to get back into your roster now, and then that'll bring up some, of course, interesting roster conversations and decisions that will need to be made. And I think we'll save those conversations for during the couple weeks off here, and we'll really maybe dive into those and what we think makes sense and doesn't make sense in terms of some of those decisions that they will have coming up if all these players do come back as expected. All right, one more game before the Olympic break, and then we all get to take a breath and watch some Olympic hockey with NHL players for the first time in many, many, many years. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be fun. The Olympics in general will be pretty cool to kind of have on every day and, just have sports on all the time, varying events. So that's always fun. I'm excited for that, to get that going here. But yeah, one more game. To end on a high note. Possibility of being the second place team in the Atlantic Division is right there if you get a loss on Detroit tonight. So exciting times ahead for sure. Exciting times ahead. Fun conversations. A lot of playoff talk. A lot of fun playoff talk for seeding. And then kind of matchup stuff as we go along here over the next few months. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And we will talk tomorrow. Post-game show after the Penguins game. And then, of course, we'll keep rocking our way through the Olympic break to touch on variety of topics as we kill some time until the team is back on the ice again. All right. Well, thanks for listening and talk soon. See ya.